Good morning and welcome to Ethnos. We are glad that you can join us today. We are excited because we seek to be a community for all people. So no matter who you are, where you're joining from, what you think about yourself, what your background is, what your experiences have been, you are welcome in our community. And so we are excited for you to be with us. We are live, and so if you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can hop in the comment section and say hi to others. We will also be asking for your feedback and some responses later on. Today, we're continuing the conversation. Pastor Joe is going to be leading the discussion on gender and how we have expectations in our cultures and our societies and what Jesus has to say about that. We're also going to spend some time praying in the middle of our service for government officials. And so there's a big transition going on this week. But to get us started off, we like to start with some musical worship where we sing to our God. And so we are going to start out thinking about seeking Him and how He is moving in our world today. And so here's Eric and Julia.
Today we're going to be sharing 3 songs with you. This first song is a song that I learned from friends in South Africa, and it's just inviting the Holy Spirit to come and be with us. The second song is one that's really important to me. It's called the Black National Anthem. The title of the song is Lift Every Voice and Sing.
We genuinely hope that these songs encourage you and inspire you and remind you that you are not alone.
Spirit, move among us. Come, Holy Spirit. Flow, living water. Flow within us. Flow, living water. Your love is alive. It's breaking the darkness. It's bringing the light to soften the heart of stone. Your love is alive. It's breaking the darkness. It's winning the fight and bringing the orphan home. Tando, tando. Wako, wako, luya pila, mbuso, mbuso, wako, wako, uya pila, uya pila. Oh, your love is alive.
Come, Holy Spirit, move among us. Come, Holy Spirit, and flow, living water. Oh, flow within us. Flow, living water. Oh, your love is alive. It's breaking the darkness and bringing the light to soften the heart of stone. Your love is alive and breaking the darkness and winning the fight and bringing the orphan home. Tando, tando, wako, wako, luya pila, luya pila, muso, muso, wako, wako, Tando wako Luya pila Buso wako Uya pila
Tando wako luya pila muso wako uya pila
Come, Holy Spirit. I feel like that's a prayer that many of us have had on our hearts, especially in the face of everything that we've had to endure this past year, both personally and collectively. Maybe you haven't uttered those exact words, come Holy Spirit, but perhaps you felt a sense of longing, of need, or of a desire for change. In just a moment, Eric is going to share a very special song, which is called Lift Every Voice and Sing. And it says, let us march on until victory is won. What I love about this anthem is that it calls us. It calls us to cling on to hope. It calls us to continue to sing, and it calls us to press on before we even see the very thing that we're longing for. So until we receive what we're hoping for, what we have not yet seen, let us march on until victory is won.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us, and sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far, oh, keep us forever on the path. We pray. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us, and sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on till victory is won.
We do look forward to the day when God's victory is fully realized. So we look at our world, we want to see Jesus. Let's join together in prayer. God, we thank you that the victory has already been accomplished on the cross, but we recognize that we still live in a world that desperately needs your grace, your love, your justice, and your ways. We pray for your kingdom to come on earth as it already is reigning in heaven. We long for the days that we are going to see you and your character and your values out in this world. Help us as we seek to be a part of it. Help us as we look to you for hope for our present and our future. We thank you that we always have you. For all this in Jesus' name. Well, thank you for joining us in singing. It's always a blessed time to be able to sing together because it's one of the ways that we connect not only with one another, but also with God. And so, Ethnos kids, you guys are free to go to your Zoom classes with your teachers. And so if anyone watching has some kids that want to join that, send us a comment, I guess, on Facebook Live, and we'll make sure you get the link for that. But for all of the adult-sized kids out there, we would love to hear from you and say hello while the parents help their kids transition. And so you can say hi in the chat. We are live on Facebook. And so if you're in the comment section, you can say hello in there. And we're going to want to hear from you a little bit later as well. So you can always get that ready. But I'll jump in there and say hello to some of you guys. And yes, if you guys love the songs, I loved the songs from today too. Both of them so far have been amazing. You can always catch those on our YouTube channel. Just search for Ethnos Community Church. Are available in there. But I want to say good morning, hello to Jen and Eric and Faith. Glad that your daughter is enjoying this song. Awesome. Good morning to Vahag, to Luke. I agree, the song was very calming, powerful. To Joy, Allie, Josh. Good to see you. Josh is the one that helps us with our video editing. Good morning, Alicia, Tracy, Emer, Beatrice, Anne. Good to see you. Spanish greetings going on in the chat today, which is always great. Let's see. Good morning to Margot. Glad you can join. Morning, Karen and Danny. Awesome for you guys to be in there. Andrew and John. Erica, Mike, and the family. Cedric, yes, you are an adult-sized kid. I think I've said that phrase a number of times. Yes. It really just means adult. Annie, it's good to see you. Glad that you can be on. We are glad that you can be a part of it, and we enjoy these times. The ability to at least say hello. I know it's only typing and little comments in a chat box right now, but it is more than we have a lot of times in the middle of the week. And so it's great to see familiar names and new names and be able to interact with one another, because we believe that God calls us to be a community. And I know that looks different during the COVID, but we thank you for your patience and hanging on. I was going through our computer, and we have done over 40 of these live streams now. Who thought that we would be doing it for this long? I remember when I first was setting up the computer and setting up the folders, I wasn't sure if I should put the year 2020 at the end of the files, because I wasn't sure if we were going to need it, but we actually did. We're in 2021 now, and still going. And so, good morning to everyone. Yes, belated happy birthdays for everyone that had birthdays this week. Annie and Joy and others. We are going to continue, though. I do have one announcement to let you know about, and that is at the end of this month, on July 31st, we are going to be having a members meeting. So if you are a member here at Ethnos, or if you just consider yourself a regular part of the community and you would like to join in, you are invited to our members meeting. We'll have that over Zoom, and so the details for that will be emailed out. And we will be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be talking about the potential elders, and so we have been training elders to join our lay elder team. So you're going to see one of them later, but we will be presenting them. We also will be talking about a possible update mid-year to the budget, because when we set our budget list past summer, we didn't know how the COVID season was going to go. And so we have some updates for you on that, and some feedback that we would like. And so you can join and be a part of that. We also invite you, if you are not a church member, you have not gone through a membership process, we do have a formal membership process. Includes one kind of class or meeting. Let me know if you'd like to become a member before then, and we can talk about a time to meet up and make that possible. All right, but we are going to transition now to a time of prayer, which we have each week, because we believe that God wants us to worship Him through music and song, but also in joining our hearts together with His to pray for things going on in our local or our wider community. And today we are going to pray for government officials. And so in the United States, there is a big transition coming up this week. And so you might have heard in the news that there's the presidential transition that happens this coming Wednesday, I believe. And it's not just the president and the vice president that is a part of it, but that includes large portions of government staffs, different departments have transitions, other department heads will have transitions. There's also many other government positions throughout the nation that are changing over. So some in San Diego have already changed. The federal Congress has changed. San Diego has a new mayor that has already started. California is actually going to have a new senator because Senator Harris is becoming vice president. And so there's actually a lot of new officials to be praying for. The Bible calls us, God calls us to pray for our government officials, whether we agree with them or not. And so I know during these times, sometimes we don't always like what is going on and agree with their positions and stances and policies. But God calls us to pray for our government officials, even when we don't like them. And so the time that was written in the Bible, the Christians were oppressed. They didn't like the government officials. The Jewish nation was basically an occupied territory, and yet God still called them, hey, these are the people that are there for you right now, and so lift them up in prayer. And so a couple of ways that you can pray. First, you can be praying for each official to be able to do their jobs well. Pray for wisdom for them. Pray for provision for them as they learn the job or transition changes. Pray for protection because that's been needed this past couple of weeks and even ongoing sometimes physical threats, but also there is a lot of pushback that government officials get. It's probably one of the hardest jobs in terms of public feedback that you can have. And so be praying for them as they transition to new roles. For the ones that come to mind, if specific government officials come to mind, pray for them. Pray for them individually. Pray for them by name. Pray for the things that they're going to be doing. Second, you can be praying for justice and peace for the disenfranchised. For people, a lot of times, especially when governments change and government officials change over, a lot of people can feel disenfranchised, disconnected with that. Because maybe it's not the person that you voted for. Maybe it means a losing of benefits or a change of policy and laws. And so there's a lot of people that feel left out. Roughly half of people often feel disenfranchised at these changeovers. And so pray for them. Pray for the peaceful transition and humility, passion in the midst of that. Pray for justice, that things will be done rightly and fairly, that wrongs will be righted. And thirdly, pray for the building of trust. This isn't just because of politics and different parties, but people in general have had a growing mistrust or distrust of the government. And so, the government doesn't always function to serve the people as it should. And so be praying for government officials who either are staying in these roles or continuing in roles or coming into new roles to be able to hear the heart of people and to communicate well in order to build trust. Trust is easily broken and much harder to rebuild. That is needed for. So you can join together and pray for these things. If you're watching with a group of people or your family, you guys can pray together as a group. Or you can pray on your own, silently or out loud. Pray for these things. We'll put them up on the screen, and we'll come back together in a couple of moments. Let's pray. Let's join together in prayer. God, we lift up to you all those that you have placed in positions of authority, both here in the United States, around the world. Pray for those who are coming into new roles, because we believe, God, that you still care about each person, whether we agree with them or not, whether we like them or not. You, God, are still in control. And so we look to you. We ask for your wisdom and provision for those, especially that are coming into new jobs, for learning how to do those, for being able to care for well, learning the. We pray especially for the president, Joe Biden, for Vice President Harris, as they come into a new administration. Pray, God, that you would give them the know-how and wisdom in order to be able to lead them well. We know, God, there is so much that is needed, not just in terms of provision, but in terms of healing and leadership as well. Pray also for our local officials, for their ability to be able to hear the needs of people and to carry out policies that are fair and right and just. We also pray, God, for the rebuilding of trust between government and populace. We know, God, that there's always disagreements, and there's always things that we don't want to happen that do, and do want to happen that don't. So we pray, God, for communication. We pray for integrity. Pray for being heard for all of the people in our populace, that the government would serve the needs of people, all people. And so we pray also this week, God, for the transition, that things would be peaceful, that things would happen as smoothly as they can. We know that there have been disruptions, and there are possibly more disruptions coming up. But we pray, God, that you would protect each life of service, that each person would have your protection, that there would be as little harm as possible. Because we believe, God, you are able to do these things. We believe you care about these things. We believe that you are in control. We look to you as our source of provision and hope. We thank you that we can pray to you because of the power of the name of your Son, Jesus. Well, thank you for joining us in prayer. Continue to pray this week and in coming weeks for all the things happening in a different government position. We're going to transition now, as we do each week, into a time where we also hear from God. And we are in a series called Disrupt, where we are thinking about how Jesus wasn't always happy with the status quo, how he would often challenge and look to change things in our society and our culture. Today, Pastor Joe's going to be joining us in a little bit, but before he does that, we actually have a little bit of an introduction, and we are going to be talking today about gender. We started that conversation last week, but today we're going to be talking more specifically about expectations that are often placed on us. And Pastor Joe's going to be talking about expectations on men and on women, and how they come from our culture and what Jesus has to say. We do realize that the Bible, when it talks about this topic, is usually most of the time talking about just very binary categories, and we are going to be focusing today's conversation specifically on men and women. But for non-binary identifying peoples, we're going to actually be talking about the LGBTQ community next month, later on in the series. So in several weeks, you can join us for that in February. But to start off, we actually have an interview that Joe did with Yvonne that we're going to play in a moment. But we actually would like you to jump on your keyboards and your phones and also answer a question that they're going to be discussing. And that is, what are some of the expectations maybe that you had on you growing up for being a man or for being a woman that you found valuable or helpful? Now, we're all going to talk, of course, about some of those that were maybe not helpful as well. But were some of the expectations that you had, the ways that you were taught for what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a woman, that you maybe enjoyed or you still find helpful, or you found that affected you, and you still carry on with you today. And so Joe and Yvonne are going to be talking about that for a little bit. It's kind of a 9-minute video that will be playing for you right now. And then we'll be joined by Pastor Joe to continue the conversation. And we'll read some of your responses. But here is the video to get us going.
Oh, hi, everyone. Well, thank you for joining in with us. And we have Yvonne here with me. And yeah, we're going to be talking about her story, her experience with gender roles and expectations and her upbringing. Just to introduce a little bit about Yvonne. Yvonne is a longtime member of Ethnos Community Church. She is a mother, she is a career woman, and she's also a candidate of our eldership here at Ethnos. Thank you so much, Yvonne. And for those who don't know her, Yvonne, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our church?
Good morning, Ethnos. So good to be here. As Joe mentioned, I've been part of Ethnos for a long time, almost 10 years, I think. And it seems like almost yesterday that we came. And I'm married to David Rideout. He works at UCSD. I work at STSU. And we have 2 children. One is 23. She lives in Alameda right now. Her name is Kendra. And I have a 17-year-old who is a senior in high school here in University City, and she's applying for colleges right now. So yeah, busy time. I'm also, my mom is here from Michigan. My father passed away recently, and so my mom is here with me. And so I'm on a new journey. Those, what do they call us, sandwich generations, where we have children and parents that we're taking care of.
That's right.
But really, I don't take care much of my daughter. She's pretty on her own, pretty self-sufficient, and I've been really blessed by David and Ellie. They've been really great with mom, and it's been a privilege to be on this new journey.
Yeah. There's a lot of hats that you're wearing, a lot of roles and responsibilities that you have. And we just wanted to hear some of them from your story. So we're in this series called Disruption, and we'll be talking about gender today. And I just wanted to get a different perspective other than my own, a male, to get a woman's perspective and share some experience around this topic. So I have a couple questions that I prepared, and would love to hear your responses. And so 3 questions. And the first one is, what were some gender roles and expectations you had growing up? Were any of them helpful or harmful? And did they change over time? And if so, how did they change? So appreciate your response. Thank you.
All right. Well, I grew up in, both my parents were full-fledged pastors or ordained in the Army. So I had a little different experience as far as church is concerned than many of my peers, in that my mom was a full-fledged pastor as well. That there were still some gender roles within the church that once the woman was married in the Salvation Army, her role was was lower than her husband's. So, for instance, even where I lived was based on my dad, not my mom, in the Salvation Army. So that is an interesting thing. So I feel like I had a very interesting growing up in that there was a lot of very explicit equality things going on, but a lot of implicit inequalities happening. And so, but it created a situation in which that I felt comfortable asking my parents and talking with my mom and about some of the gender roles and some of the things that were happening gender wise. And then when I graduated from high school, I actually went to a women's college. And so that was the time when, well, Ms. magazine came out like right before I went to college. And so that I'm aging myself. But also, so I spent a lot of time thinking about gender roles. And at Mount Holyoke, my college, there was a lot of preaching about how everybody was equal, men and women equal. And we were not only equal, the same. And I believed that for a long time. That's the context text in which I prayed. And so my name is Temple, but my husband's name is Rideout. I kept my name. And even that's patriarchal, right? My maiden name. But mostly I kind of kept to the implicit gender roles. I didn't really consider my position, my job, or my career as the most important. But also has to do with personality. Like I'm a kind of encourager. So David's career was more important to me. But as I get older, things have changed a lot. I feel like I'm noticing more the implicit qualities and being able to bring them up to explicit so I can see them and I can talk about them more. And I feel like I know a lot more women who have broken gender expectations. For instance, when I'm newly married, it was very explicitly expected that women had to get married. It was, and the idea of planning to not have children was very unusual. It was not very. And now I feel like that is not the case. That's a choice that women can make as when they get married. There's no expectation that you have to have children. Whereas when I was younger, when I was first married, that was an expectation, right? Other things too. You know, being a stay-at-home dad, that was very unusual. Or both careers be equal was very unusual. But really gotten better, and I think there's still things that I'm really questioning. For instance, I don't agree with the preaching of knowledge. We are equal, I think, men and women. We're not the same. I mean, women have the children. We are physically, you know. And so having children is a completely different experience for women. I think that is part of God's plan, but it's very different than, it makes things challenging women actually have to have accommodations in their healthcare, in the way that their benefits are planned in their workplace. And sometimes it's not that way. The accommodations aren't there. A lot of times it isn't. Those medical plans are made for considering men first. Then, we need to think about women's health too, right? So those really changed over the years. But I now, like in my parenting, I've tried to help my daughters know more kinds of women, men, because I think the partner of the person that if you get married, partner matters too, and you have both men and women who have the same understanding and belief system about roles or gender roles.
That's important.
So I think it's good. It's better now. But.
It's always progressing and changing. And it sounds like you've adapted to those changes, and even some of those roles and expectations can be unusual. But you're doing the best. And so I want to thank you again for just sharing briefly about your experience growing up and some of those changes and some of the important values, like getting to know your partner well, and some things that you notice in culture and observation and healthcare, and some practical things that aren't considered when it comes to gender. And so, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, this was insightful for me, and I feel gifted and blessed just to hear a little bit about your story and your perspective. So, thank you, Yvonne, and I hope it was a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. And so we are joined now by Joe on Zoom. Joe, can you hear us okay?
I hear you guys great.
All right. And I think we've got you as well. And so thanks for that time with Yvonne. We did have some people commenting on that question as well and sharing some of their experiences. We did have some people that were talking about how just even the idea and the conversation is certainly difficult because some of those expectations were not helpful to them. But we have some people talking about the expectation to go to college despite gender, and that everyone should have their own career. Someone else mentioned the expectation of learning to take care of others and being empathetic, and that's coming from a woman. There's a man who writes that there's an expectation to take care of your family, so whether that's as a breadwinner or a provider of the family. And but they're continuing to still learn and grow in what gender roles can be. See, someone mentioned learning that God uses both men and women in roles of leadership, and so they saw that example from their mother. Another person mentions the expectation or the value to be trusted and honest, no matter your gender, and embracing the fact that both men and women are different. See, one person mentions that there is the cultural expectation that women are often at home caring for children, not necessarily having education or career. But they were challenged as a woman, but they were challenged by their dad to ask questions. And especially moving on towards grad school. Someone else mentions being a good provider for your family and always respecting your elders. Yeah, and so, those were some of the things that people brought up. I don't know, Joe, if you had something you wanted to share about how you grew up.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing your responses to that question. It's enriching for me and super insightful. Understanding different perspectives. So thank you. My short, fun example is when I was growing up, I always saw my dad take out the trash, kind of do some yard work, just kind of do the things that were just kind of like, just the harder things in the household, the kind of like smellier things, not as glamorous things, and definitely not the easiest. And so with that, it wasn't explicit. My dad didn't tell me, "Hey, as a man, you got to do this," but it just kind of seeing him show by example. My brother and I, we took on those chores, and even to this day, I take out the trash and clean around the house, and I've even taken on the role of doing most of the dishes, and almost always. And so that's kind of how those kind of seeing my dad take care of the household has influenced me and were very helpful and valuable to me. Transition.
Yeah, and so I'll turn the rest of the time over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So as I transition, thank you. I really appreciate our prayer time for our country, our nation, our community, especially in this week. And as we're talking about disruption, I do want to, my intention is to be sensitive to this topic. I'm aware that many have experienced a lot of hurt, um, most likely abuse, harm, judgment, and shame as a, as a, as a gender. And so I definitely want to be gentle and courteous in my language as well. And so I want to invite you all, if my language is triggering, please email me because I want to be corrected and I want to humbly grow as a communicator, as a pastor as well. So thank you guys, and I'm excited to preach from God's word and to listen and reflect what God has to say to us in this topic. And gender roles and expectations, I believe they come from culture, um, and especially in today's climate, we know that there is a lot of inequality, discrimination, abuse, shame, and judgment when it comes to uh, gender roles and and those sort of things. And some of us have experienced the bad and the ugly, and some of us, like we've been sharing, have experienced the good and the valuable. And so there's beauty and brokenness in our culture and in regards to our gender roles and expectations. And my hope is that as we reflect and listen to God's word, that we'll be inspired by Jesus to live disruptively in a way that our faith can inform and empower us to live with hope, courage, and endurance in thinking about our roles in our gender. So when I think about Jesus, Jesus as a Jewish man, he was a product of culture. He was inserted in a time in history um, where in that time, the Jewish culture, it was mainly patriarchal, um, and he followed the traditions and customs of the day. Jesus obeyed his parents when he had to take the annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem for Passover. He attended synagogues and learned probably the family trade by his dad, and and saw many models and relatives and seeing kind of gender roles. So Jesus was not ignorant, and he wasn't clueless about gender roles. But actually, he was well informed, and he played by the rules of culture, and he also honored culture. He does this by sharing many stories and parables um, of women and men in their roles of that society. And he also shares a lot of the women's perspective because a lot of his followers were men. And he wanted to give insight to the men, thinking as a woman and how they live their lives in their roles, and how Jesus also downplays some of those stereotypes and offers something better, a way of discipleship as a follower of Jesus, as a kingdom citizen. So those are some of the things that we're going to reflect on. And I want to take a look at three aspects of culture to just make observations and insights on the text in thinking about gender roles and expectations and our response to them. The first story that I wanted to look at was in Luke 10:38 to 39. And it's regarding hospitality. And this is a familiar story. And I believe last summer we taught on this passage. But I just wanted to take one aspect of the story in talking today about gender roles and expectations. I'll read this passage for us. Luke 10:38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. I instantly noticed that it was her home. It was Martha's home. It wasn't She had a brother named Lazarus, and they had some means, but it was Martha's home. She was a woman of the house. And for people who are familiar with the story, um, we know that there were disciples listening to Jesus's teaching um, at that day. And there was just a lot of things to do. And Martha, being a woman and seeing her role to serve the people in her home, because hospitality is huge in that culture, to welcome them, to make them feel comfortable, is just, um, you know, to be inclusive and to serve them just shows just a great hospitality culture. But there was a lot of things to do, and she felt so overwhelmed. And she was venting and complaining to Jesus to tell him for basically for Mary to help her out with some of their chores. But Jesus responds to Martha by so tenderly saying, "Martha, Martha, um, you know, Mary, she chose the better way, and which is listening to Jesus' teaching and learning under the feet of a rabbi, a teacher of that day." And when I think about this passage, I think about Mary and her courageous kind of act and her response, because in that day, in that culture, mostly like I said, mostly men were followers of rabbis, were listening to the teachings of Torah. Even in that day, women weren't allowed to study under a rabbi. And so Mary had the chance that Jesus is coming into their home, and she wanted to take full advantage in the midst of all these men. And I see that a lot of just courage, just kind of going against the grain to be a disciple and choose the better way. And Jesus acknowledges that. And so the word I get is that Mary decided to adopt um, a different way instead of the culture's expectations of doing the household chores, being hospitable to their guests. That there is also a better way, and so um, Jesus wanted to teach and encourage Martha that lesson, that teaching. And so that's just one example. I'm sure there were many other times, and that Jesus acknowledges women in their service as well. And so, yeah, I could think of another story, but just moving on. The next aspect of culture I want to talk about is vocation. And in Matthew 4 18 to 20, um, I'll just read that. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. This is also a passage that we spoke about very recently. And what I noticed about this passage is that these were seasoned fishermen. They were fishermen by trade, probably trained by their parents, and this was a family business. And in those times, if you couldn't be a student of a prestigious rabbi, you were pretty much rejected and had to find another livelihood. And for men to provide, so important, like many of our cultural expectations in the past and even today, to be the breadwinner, to be the provider. That was the expectation, and many men took on that role and found that valuable. But what did Jesus say to them is that in this season, in this moment, they had a choice to continue going, you know, I guess, fulfilling their culture's expectations to be a provider, to make income, to have finances, or to follow a rabbi. It may be he may be the Messiah. They weren't 100% sure, so there's a lot of uncertainty to that in that. And their choice was to respond to Jesus' invitation to come and follow, to come and see. And so they left their identity as a breadwinner, their cultural expectation as a man to be a provider, and they followed Jesus' ministry for a season, day in and day out, to be dependent on the gifts and for people to provide their means for their ministry. And so what I see here is that sometimes Jesus may call us to abandon our gender roles and expectations, to replace from following Jesus in his discipleship, in his calling, and in his ways. Maybe for a season, um, maybe for a long season, but Jesus, Jesus's invitation, I believe, is always something to fulfill some of those deep longing desires in our identity for something even greater. So the word I hear is sometimes is abandoned. Um, some of our gender roles and expectations we held so tightly in growing up as yeah, in our gender as a man or woman. And the last story, or the last passage, is Ephesians 5:33. And I'll read that. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So the aspect of culture I wanted to highlight is marriage. And for some of us, we may have heard the very controversial passage that in the scriptures in the Bible book of Ephesians, where Apostle Paul, the author of this book, tells this church in Christian household and in marriage that wives submit to your own husband. Um, and we have heard it. We've heard. Some of us may have heard that teaching in church, but I think what's missing is also the verses before and also completing that verse in 22. And so the verse right before says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." And um, Paul does highlight wives, submit yourself to your own husband. But the completing that verse is as you do to the Lord, as you submit yourself to the Lord. And when I think about submitting to the Lord, and as we read and as I highlight the verse that we just read, submission to me is love and respect. Each of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. And so when I think about submission, when I think about God's way, and when we pray the disciples' prayer or the Lord's prayer, for those who are familiar, we're praying for God's will to be done here on earth. And some of those times, those aren't my ways that I want. Some of those prayers aren't my ways. Some of those times, God's ways are just more difficult because it requires more courage, because it requires more love, something that I don't have innately in myself. And so that's what it's emphasizing, and that in people and wives and husbands, there's going to be a time, a lot of tension, a lot of conflict, a lot of frustrations. But at the same time, we want to pray and we want to submit to the way of the Lord, for a way of forgiveness, so the way of loving without demanding or asking in return, giving, offering grace first when they don't deserve it. And these are so countercultural because, even in today's time, you get respect if you give me respect. I'll give you love if get love in return. But what Paul is saying is that sometimes, and there's probably a reason why This verse says, wife, the wife respect her husband, because maybe in God's wisdom that husbands, men, we have a need for respect, and and uh, and Paul also encourages the husband to love his wife, because sometimes in God's wisdom that uh, wife or women is needing of love, but it doesn't only mean that that the gender roles, a man and only gives love to his wife, or the man or the wife only gives respect to the husband, because we also need um, those I guess roles and aspects and services to be done for us. We need love as a man, and for women, they also need respect. So it's not just um, wife only respect your husband, husbands only love your wife, but it's so sometimes those are greater emphasis in those teachings. And so the word I get is sometimes we need to adapt and also be flexible in those terms, because all of us and we need those divine things from God to serve one another in our role, in our gender, because sometimes we are lacking and we're running on low and we need God's help. And so, how does this apply to us today? When I think about roles, I think about that roles have three things, and I made easy to remember words. They have a choice, a cost, and a calling. And before I go into what they mean, a choice and a cost and calling, many of the times in Scripture, the way of reading and interpreting Scripture, a lot of times the Scripture is describing the passage in its context, in its culture, in its history, and it's not prescriptive. It's not always a command, but when it is prescriptive, got to see the context. Is it always? Is it only? And perhaps there is a reason why there's an emphasis on that um, prescribed verse or a command in Scripture. And so, being a good student of God's Word, we can find the reason for that Scripture that may be offensive or that may be controversial, and we can see it as a practice of humility as well. So, going to back to roles, what I mean by roles have choices. Many of us, we've been modeled and trained in our culture to have expectations, and in some traditions, very some traditions can be strict or very loose on gender roles, and expectations can be explicit or implicit. And we generally have a choice in our culture how we want to live in this world. Like Yvonne was mentioning, times are changing, they're progressing, and we have many choices on how we can respond to expectations from the past and how we can also create a new way forward. And with all those many choices, um, we have there are also costs or trade-offs. And so when I think about the biblical times, there weren't a lot of choices, but now in our culture and today, um, we just have a lot of choices, but it doesn't mean our choices don't have a cost. And what do I mean? So in our imperfect culture and in our time today, there are, when I talk about costs, I always have to talk about the people in power, the abuse, the systemic injustices, the people who discriminate and think other people are inferior. So the same goes in gender roles and expectations. There are certain reality, the brokenness of culture that's in play. And in this, there's a choice and a cost, and so live and accepting and honoring a way forward as a gender. And if you're going against the grain or with the grain, there's always going to be some kind of pushback or response. And so whether we're fighting for inequality, we're going to get pushback. Whether we're in a more dominant or majority culture in our gender and expectations, we might be labeled as archaic or just kind of backwards. And so wherever we are in the spectrum of moving forward and the choice that we've made, there's always going to be a cost. We see that in Mary's choice. We see that in Martha's choice. We see that in um, Peter's choice and the disciples' choice. And so there's going to be a cost in the way forward, the way Jesus invites us to go. And lastly, when there's a cost, there's also a calling, the invitation, what Jesus is calling us into. And we see that Jesus is offering a new way or a better way forward. He's disrupting the current culture's expectations and roles, and is inviting us to, in a different way, in a better way. And so when I think about Jesus, the calling that he had in that time was he wanted to empower women. He wanted to include women in those days as his disciples and followers. He wanted to share stories like none of his contemporary or even before in his tradition were doing. And so, and that's the calling that we can have. We may not um, we may not have the same calling to advocate for inequality, or we may not have our lifelong pursuit for a cause in gender specifically, but but in our gender, we each have a calling, we each have a role on how to be loving, on how to be a disciple, and how to follow and um, accept Jesus' invitation to move forward in our gender. So um, whether it's some of us, whether we as a man, some of us we may have held our identity as a protector and a provider, and Jesus may be inviting us to let go of that certainty and to follow him. And maybe as a woman, they've been holding on to this identity as a wife or not a wife, as a mother or not a mother, and Jesus is inviting us to follow and make a choice and to follow that pursuit, because that pursuit is holy and good. And whether it's and in those choices, I believe I just want to end with this, that, or just kind of touch on this, that in these choices, there can be a lot of loss and grieving, because sometimes in life, choices are more forced upon, whether it's economic, something happens in our economy, whether something happens to our biology, an accident happens, that some of those choices have been lost, and that we've held on to those expectations and things that we wanted to accomplish in our gender, whether it's motherhood, fatherhood, providing, any of those examples. And there's a lot of grief and loss, and we need people to we need others to find our support and care in those times of grieving. And when we grieve well, we can understand how God is trying to continue invite gently to something that we may have not thought about, and so something and that God wants to fulfill in a different way than we originally anticipated and expected. And what would it look like for some of us in our marriages, and we've heard in some traditional, more conservative Christian circles, that a lot of us, some of us, we've heard that as the men usually get the calling from God, and now the woman has to just completely support that calling. But what would it look like if um, in an age of disruption in our culture, that what if the 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 woman in the marriage gets a call in ministry or in other kind of vocational work, and the man can choose to support her calling in that way, to mutually support. Um, and so, there's a lot of, I think, um, just imagining and prophetic imagining and visioning and examples that we can think of. And my just intention of sharing a few is just also to be balanced, and not to just say one side or the other, but to have to just think about the way Jesus disrupts our culture here and now, and to choose some of these way forward, accepting the costs, and also just being committed to that calling. And because being pioneers, being the first ones to do this, it's radical, it's counter intuitive, countercultural, it's disruption, and in those times, um, yeah, in those times, I believe Jesus is inviting us, um, inviting us to that promise where Jesus will be with us. Jesus will continue to empower us in our gender, in our roles. That fruit will be shown, and that we can rely and depend on God's faithfulness in that commitment uh, to honor our roles that God has given to us. So that's, I hope this encourages you, and we'll continue our conversation with some questions at this time. And so, Scott, I'll hand it off to you.
All right. And so thanks, Joe, for that word. Yeah, definitely love to dig into this. For everyone that's watching, as Joe mentioned, we'd love to actually hear from you. So if you have some questions or some comments, you can hop into our Facebook live stream and comment on there, and we're going to read some of the questions and try to talk about them. And so my awesome wife, Lydia, is going to have the comment section open and read some of the questions. There is a little bit of a delay, so if you have a question, we'd love for you to get it in right now. We have about a 20-30 second delay before we can actually read them. But Joe, I want to thank you again for the message. Yeah, I think there were so many helpful things in there, and I really love how you distinguish that there's things that are implicitly and explicitly kind of placed upon us when it comes to expectations. Sometimes we are told that what you're supposed to do, but sometimes we just feel it, and that's not always easy to identify because sometimes it seems like they're upset that I didn't get a job that pays enough money, or that I'm not looked on as well because I don't have kids, or I'm not in a certain type of role, and so those things can be felt sometimes more than they're actually. I think that was a great distinction.
Thanks.
Do we have some questions ready to go? I know there was a bunch of comments earlier. I wasn't following them all, but I know some people were chatting in the comment section, which is great.
The comment: I appreciate the permission to be flexible and adaptable when reading the word, sometimes because it's written in context. So, for example, this person said, like, submitting to your husbands. For me, I still feel the negativity towards gender roles because I am not rigidly following the word.
There's I think in scripture there's a very wooden literal translation that some preachers and teachers can harp on and emphasize, but I think there's a lot of freedom and flexibility when we take that passage into its entire kind of, they say, like a biblical more theology, and we see how that may be different, and how we can reconcile some of those things. So, like when wives say submit to their husbands, but when we hear a verse that says mutually submit to one another, how can we reconcile those, and how we submit to Christ? And so so even the submission, the word is very weighty, but I think if we continue to unpack what it means to submit to Christ, and I think we're going to talk about leadership in a few weeks. Submitting to Christ, I think it's a beauty, it's a joy, because Christ never lords and powers and forces and is violent in his leadership, and so there's always a gentle invitation, nurturing, caring, that's the standard. And sadly, Jesus is saying that this is a standard in some of these passages of submission and household relations and marriage relationships, and that in this standard, that's what it can look like. Um, but yeah, it's I think hard to live into that. So.
You know, and I like how this whoever wrote that comment, and Joe, how you've been talking about the idea of permission too. The Bible actually talks about some roles that way as well. For instance, it talks to the single people. It's good for you to be single, and you have a call to live as a single person, and that might be how you are for life. But married people, that's a good thing too, right? And so it kind of recognizes that there's good in both, and there's directions maybe that are different, in those different areas. But that doesn't mean one's better than the other, and we all need to be a certain way. It recognizes that we're all in kind of different.
That's right.
There's a comment that says, "Thanks for the message, Pastor Joe. The message reminds me of how important it is to be a safe person to our family, friends, and others, to be discerning enough to not push our own views on others, and being respectful to let others live their truth. Also important being firm enough in your own shoes to stand up for your own beliefs and truths, to not be swayed by the expectations of others."
Yeah. I love that tension. I feel like I just had many conversations even this past few weeks, so with close friends and family, and even my wife, and just holding that, like living your truth, and also not pushing an agenda, disagreeing well, or just trying to continue to explore and understand each other, because it can be charged, these kind of topics and conversations. And so I think a good practice, general rule of thumb, is continue to understand first, and to hear other perspectives, and to serve people in that way. And in time, I think when people are both ready, we can also share just different reasons, and how we came up to that. And I think this is one of the ways in messages and Q&A that we can do that. So.
And in addition to that, I think the expectations that have been on us, and so reflecting on that question, that you were asking at the beginning, is important because of what this commenter is saying. Because there's times that we then end up pushing those expectations on others, and it's not always something that we might directly say. But for instance, if you have maybe like a daughter who is playing sports and really into sports, but you always make a comment about like playing with the boys, or how it's a man's world or something like that, it might implicitly kind of convey that women don't belong kind of in those areas. Just by making things uncomfortable and not safe, we actually convey a message. And so culture a lot of times is in the unspoken messages, not the spoken.
That's right. That reminds me, thanks for sharing that. That reminds me, I think a lot of times parents have good intentions, of like saying like, this is a man's world. It might be a little rough, but I think also to share some vulnerability and some feelings that, because like I was saying, there's a cost and a trade-off. Because it's a man's world, it may be more difficult. So to share those feelings, and to try to navigate, and to help equip our children, that daughter, to be prepared in those ways because of the brokenness. And so all we can do is prepare, equip. But when that time comes, when there's hurt and abuse, and I think that's that's everyone's journey to face. And so I think that leading up to it and preparing is helpful, and not to just kind of dismiss it, not to say that it's not a noble cause to pursue those things, but it's just difficult on that reality. So I understand as well.
That's good.
Mhm.
Individual says feeling conflicted. I think it's great as a woman I can choose to have a career, but I don't know how I can balance pursuing that and also being there for my daughter. I carry with me emotional baggage from my own upbringing, lack of mother and lack of good parental role models. So I really want to be there for my daughter. Maybe this is something that is just hard, where I have to pick how much time to do which thing, as it's not possible to do both as far as I can see. And I hear a lot of mothers who go through a similar tension. You're not alone. And that is it is unbalanced in that way, I think, between men, and that I won't get into that, but this is just wanted to validate that comment.
Definitely.
And I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, definitely validate. I also validate that comment, and I just hear, maybe I just hear also maybe guilt, trying to do the best, being overwhelmed with the responsibility of to do the best in all kind of spheres of life, to be a provider, to be there for children, to be the best, they can be. And so, I definitely hear that. And so some of those, I guess, way forward is thinking about the trade-offs. And I think they mentioned about, sometimes you just have to accept what can and can't is possible, or what can and can't that they do. And so finding things that they control and having that support, people to acknowledge, people to validate, people having role models, and that's such a life giver. It's so it gives adds nutrients to our souls when we have a community that surrounds us, saying like, it's tough, and we can help one another in that way. But so I think all of that is it's good, and helpful.
I would say that's part of the cost and the calling, but that you were talking about, Joe.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are going to push back, and because of their expectations, or they're going to give us grief, whatever it is, or even to validate themselves, right? Sometimes they're trying to justify their own choices. They will sometimes attack or push back on the choices that we have made. And that is going to be a cost when we make a choice that's different from other people. That actually goes in whatever direction, right? That might be choosing to just focus on your daughter, whoever this person is, or that might be they see you as taking a career and you're neglecting your daughter, right? Either way, you kind of are missing out. And so that's actually, I think, the third thing when you were talking about calling is so important, right? Because the more we understand what God's called us to do and asked us to do, and we have made that choice and know what it is that we're trying to do, the easier it becomes to kind of shut out those other voices, or focus on just what God has asked us to. People are always going to push back. That doesn't mean that we need to listen, follow it.
That's right. This is a comment, I think, when sometimes when they hear those pushbacks and just negativity, it's a lot of like lies and deceptions, that there's a lot of loss in that, and that may be true, and the feeling is real, but I think that God offers so much more to that, and God can be with us in that, God can be with us in any kind of circumstances, and we can feel so much joy and so much life, whether we choose one or the other. So I think calling is I think, thank you for sharing that. I think that's like that's where we can hone in and accept and embrace and find joy in that. And so I think of many people's callings and definitely one thing, like the trade-offs of one thing will maybe be neglected or not as attentive to, but there's so much more to gain. And I think, just human nature, we focus on the loss and what's missing out, but being present and being attentive to what we're gaining and what God is doing in our life is also a good practice to do.
Yeah, and to whoever that comment was, or anyone that's feeling that way, know those choices aren't between a right and a wrong, right? It's not trying to figure out which one is morally better. It's a choice between two good, positive things, right? So they both have costs, yes, and they have trade-offs, but it's one of them doesn't make you, a bad person. You might have regrets, yes, and there is a grief process talked about, but it's not something that condemns us.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for the comments. We're going to wrap that time up here. Continue the discussion in the chat. But it is a good topic, and I'm glad that we've been reflecting on it, hearing a lot of your guys' reflections on it. Thanks, Joe, again for leading the discussion today.
Thank you, guys. See you guys.
All right. We are going to continue to reflect, and we're going to do that through song. And so we do that because we believe that God speaking to us doesn't just come through the written word in the text. It doesn't come just through whoever's bringing the message that week. But God wants to speak to us through his Holy Spirit. For every person who has put their trust in Jesus, Jesus promises, I'm going to send the Spirit to encourage you, to be with you, to be present, to live inside of you. And so all of these questions that we're wrestling with, or the things that we're processing from our past or our present, God is there with us in that. That doesn't always mean he's going to give us an answer, although we would like that. It means he is there in the midst of the questioning. He's there to be with us, hear us. He sees us in all of it. And so we are going to reflect with this song from Leah and Andy that helps us to think about that. What does Jesus reign like inside of our hearts?
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. For you are good. Oh, you are good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. Oh,
Let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. And let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. And let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. And let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good. You're good. Oh, you are good. You're good. never gonna let me down. You're 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 never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, 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 and you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. Oh, you're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you're so good, you're good. Oh.
So thankful for God's presence. I know so many of us need it. And if you have been processing things today and you feel like you're still in the middle of that and you need support, you need other people to help, I encourage you to reach out to others in the community. It's like, I have some things I'm wrestling with and they're not easy. But let's bring ourselves to God and ask Him for our help. God, we thank you that your love is always bigger and wider and deeper we can ever anticipate. So you have created every person in this world, love each person in this world. So we pray, God, for the ways that we are wrestling with sorting the expectations of this world, calling of your voice. I pray, God, that you would sharpen our hearing to see and to hear only what you want for us. Pray for each person that's feeling the hurt past. Pray, God, that you are their healer and their comforter. Pray, God, that you would help us as we continue to seek what does it understand for us to live differently in this world. We thank you for this time, sacred, and so we honor your name. Call us by the name of your Son. Well, thank you for joining us and for being a part of today. As I mentioned, if you need to continue processing, definitely continue that in community. And so reach out to one another. But otherwise, we're going to sign off here. We know tomorrow is a holiday, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And so actually the following 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about race and the church and how Jesus calls us to disrupt in that area. And so join us for that. But as we sign off, we're going to leave you with one more song, a video from Emer in Florida that encourage us in how we are called to live. And so thank you. Thanks for joining us. We will see you guys next time.
The song you're about to hear, We Will Bless, New Benijon, is a song that I wrote about 2.5 years ago in English and in French. It's in the soca or soul of calypso style, which hails from Trinidad, and it's a song of celebration. We celebrate in the text that God is with us. He is Emmanuel. In any season of life, whether we're in a season of victory or in a season of lament, we are not alone. He is with us. We can trust him. We can trust his word. He is faithful. But we also celebrate another gift that we have, which is the gift of community, each other. The beloved community, a term used many times by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is one that is inter-ethnic, intercultural, and international. It's people from all over the world and people who trust in the Creator. And so we need each other more than ever in the times that we face. So we celebrate this in this song, and you'll see that the team, the vocalists and the instrumentalists that appear on We Will Bless New Beniharon, hail from different backgrounds, including Canadian, Haitian, Filipino, African-American, Anglo-American, and Puerto Rican. I hope you're inspired by this song as we were as inspired as we sang and played it.